Hello, everyone. My name is Beth Griggs, and I work for IBM in their Node.js runtime team. And this is my second NodeConf, really happy to be here again. And today, what I'm going to talk about is how Node is 10 years old. And what we're going to do is look at the past 10 years, the highlights of what's happened over the past 10 years and where we are today. And later on in the presentation, look at the new features in the new versions of Node, so Node 12 and 13. We'll also take a look at some of the people that keep the activity in the project going. So back to where it all started. So in one of Ryan Dahl's talks, A History of Node.js, he mentions that he feels Node.js stems primarily from trying to solve the upload progress bar problem. So what it is when you're uploading a file, how could you work out how much of the file had been uploaded? And he looked at various of the techniques of doing this back in 2009, using iframes, sending AJAX requests to query how much had been uploaded. But then he also started to look at a technique called long polling. And it was the long polling technique that he wanted to optimize a server for. He actually started writing the project in Ruby and C, but he found that Ruby just wasn't fast enough. He then tried writing it in just C, but unfortunately no one was getting excited about just a C web server. Eventually he realized JavaScript was the perfect solution because web developers were already familiar with it, and there were already JavaScript communities around, so lots of people to get behind the project. And he started working on this JavaScript implementation of the project, and in around March 2009, he named it Node. And it was in Berlin at JSConf 2009 where he really introduced Node.js to the world. So the thesis of his talk was I/O needed to be done differently. And so he introduced Node as server-side JavaScript, built on Google's V8 engine, invented non-blocking I/O, and using the common JS module system. Back then, it was just 8,000 lines of C, C++ code, 2,000 lines of JavaScript, and we'd got to about 14 contributors. Also in 2009, NPM was created. And this was created as an open source project to help JavaScript developers share and reuse code. And unsurprisingly, around the same time, we started to see the birth and growth of popular web frameworks. So the first, Express, that was actually inspired by Ruby's Sinatra framework and for building web apps and APIs, and Socket.io for building real-time web applications. And these were both created as far back as 2010. And by early 2010, we started seeing Node.js services available in cloud. So this is actually Heroku announcing experimental support in around April 2010. And this is all while Node.js was still at version 0.1. So we're already seeing cloud services at 0.1. And by 2011, we also started seeing large companies, enterprises coming out announcing that they were using Node.js in production. And this is quite surprising again, these big enterprises using a technology that was again still at 0.1 or 0.2. And then in 2011, Node v063 came out. And the interesting thing about this release was that it was the first release that bundled NPM. 2012 saw the creation of the Happy framework. And the interesting thing I like about this framework is it was actually created by Walmart to deal with their Black Friday demands for scaling. So all of the customers that need to come in and buy things on Black Friday, they actually built a framework to handle this in Node.js. And again, more web frameworks, there's a bit of a theme here. So Kraken was created by PayPal, and they actually extended Express to suit their use cases. Kobo was released in 2013. Kobo was actually created by the original author of Express, but they had a view of trying to make it simpler, smaller, and more expressive, and also modular. In 2013, we also saw lots and lots of references to mean stack applications, grouping MongoDB, Express, Angular, and Node together as a set of technologies. And at the time, this was really kind of a rival to the LAMP stack, so Linux, Apache, MySQL. In 2014, as I'm sure of you may be aware, a big year for Node, there was an IOJS fork. There are many reasons cited for the IOJS fork, but among the reasons there were a desire for faster moving releases, so IOJS felt that they could create releases more frequently and faster moving, ES6 support, and a desire for open governance. And by early 2015, the Node.js Foundation was established. Many companies and corporations came together to build the Node.js Foundation underneath the Linux Foundation so that they could build a Node.js community around neutral and open governance. And by around early 2015, Q1, Node.js and iOS planned to merge. And they set out a reconciliation proposal, and by around Q2, the two projects were merged back together underneath the Node.js Foundation. And it was around this time Node 4 was released. So Node.js was at version 0.12, and iOJS was at version 3.3. So they merged together as 4 because iOJS had already taken the version 1, 2, and 3, which is why you don't have any Node.js version 1, 2, and 3. And this was the first fully converged IO and Node.js release. And it was also the first release to follow a long-term support policy. So we've set this policy out since 2015. And the policy states that we will do 2 major releases per year, of which the even number of releases, which come out around April time, will be supported for a period of 30 months. And this gives individuals and businesses a platform on which to grow. And I feel it really helped enterprises adopt Node.js because they had time to migrate and upgrade. A lot of big businesses are still, it will take them time to migrate to new versions. And again, the LTS policy, we also started naming the stable release lines after elements of the periodic table. So Node 4 was Argon, and it's alphabetical from there. In 2015, the Node.js Foundation was still growing, so more member companies were signing up. So the likes of Yahoo, Rising Stack, etc. And in early 2016, Express joined the Node.js Foundation as an incubator project. The incubator program offered assistance and governance mentorship to the projects that were being onboarded, should they wish to use it. And the reason Express was onboarded is because it was so critical to the ecosystem, and it even is still today. So I think this week I checked, and it's still getting about 10 million downloads a week. So because it's so critical to a large portion of Node.js users, it was necessary to bring it under a foundation where it could be under open and neutral governance. So also in 2016, Node 6 was released. And in this release, module loading got faster. We got a new buffer API, and this was to stop people falling in the pitfalls of the old buffer API. V8 was updated to 5.1, and we got some ES6 features. So we got default function parameters, REST parameters, etc. Node 6 went end of life in April, so hopefully none of you are still using it. 2016 was also the year of the left pad incident. I'm not sure how many people remember this. But what happened, there's a heavily depended on module in the ecosystem called leftpad. You may not have been requiring it directly, but it could have been at some point up in your dependency tree. And it was unpublished from NPM for reasons. And basically, it caused people's NPM installs when they were deploying to production to fail. NPM quickly republished the package to fix people's issues. But the surprising thing at the time is that the whole module was just 11 lines of JavaScript that padded a string. So I really think this incident in particular started really highlighting the concerns around dependency management and usage in Node.js. And unsurprisingly, Yarn was released that same year. And this was collaboration between Facebook, Google, Exponent, and Tilde to solve some of the issues they were seeing with dependency management. So they were having problems with consistency, security, and performance. So they built their own solution for that. In 2017, Node 8 Carbon was released. This came with NAPI, which provides an application binary interface that's stable between versions of Node, which means if you're writing native add-ons, You don't need to recompile against different versions of Node. We got util promisify to promisify the core util functions in Node. And it was also the first release that came with unflagged async await. As a reminder, if you're still using Node 8, it goes end of life on the 31st of December. This is actually 4 months shorter than the typical 30-month support period. And that's because OpenSSL that was shipped with Node 8 actually goes end of life on the 31st of December. So we had to bring the Node.js end of life date to align with the OpenSSL end of life date. After the 1st of December, there will be no security updates. This is a slide from Node Interactive in 2017, really just showcasing how widespread adoption of Node.js have become. So 3 billion downloads a week from NPM. And it was in 2018, Node 10 was released. In this release, HTTP2 was stable. There was improved support for ECMAScript modules. There was an FS promises API, and we got async generators via the V8 upgrade. Node 10 will be supported until April 2021, so you've still got time left if you're on that release. In early 2019, so up to this year now, the Node.js Foundation and JS Foundation merged to form the OpenJS Foundation. There are currently 32 projects under this banner, including Node, and 26 member companies. And the idea is to facilitate collaboration across the JavaScript ecosystem. So instead of having Node over here and all of the JavaScript projects elsewhere, joining us all together. 2019, we hit 1 million packages on NPM. And also, Node 12 was released. So Node 12 was released in April. And it actually entered into LTS just 3 weeks ago today. So you're now safe and good to use it in production, and it will be continued to be supported all the way until April 2022. So if you're looking to upgrade to a new version of Node, you should target 12, because 12 will buy you the most time. For the next 12 months or so, it will be in the active LTS state, and that means it will continue to actually receive new features, bug fixes, security fixes. After that, it will go into 18 months of maintenance, and at that point, you will only get bug fixes and security updates. Occasionally, the release team will pull in new features into releases that are in maintenance, but the times in which we do that is when that new feature would actually support adoption of later release lines or make migration easier. So looking at some of the features in Node 12, so V8 got updated to V8 7.7. So this came with async stack traces, and lots of things got faster. We got faster await, faster parsing of JavaScript, and we also got private class fields. And one feature in particular I like that came via the V8 upgrade is the promise.all settled. The difference between promise.all and promise.all settled is that promise.all will short-circuit the second one of your promises reject, whereas promise.all settled waits for all of your promises to execute or complete, whether they reject or resolve. Also, in Node 12, we got an upgrade to the updated ES6 module support. This is currently behind the flag -- experimental modules, and it's really our modules team in the Node community that's pushing forward the updates to the ES6 module support. One of the features included is import-export statements are supported in JavaScript files. There is a plan to unflag it in 12 eventually, but we're not quite there yet, and we're just waiting for things to bake a little bit more. Another feature in Node 12 is diagnostic reports. This is currently experimental behind the flag -- experimental report. And if any of you have had the pleasure of working with Java, a diagnostic report is a bit like a Java core file. So it will generate you a report that contains information that will help you diagnose problems in your application. So the kind of things that will help you diagnose is crashes, slow performance, memory leaks, high CPU usage, and more. This was actually originally an external module under the Node.js Foundation. called Node report, and you could npm install it separately. But we actually merged it into Node core to support adoption. The PR to merge it in was actually contributed by a colleague of mine, Garish, and it actually had almost 1,000 comments on it, and it's definitely one of the most reviewed PRs that I've seen. There is a workshop, I believe it's tomorrow, that will cover how you can use these diagnostic reports and teach you how to make use of them. Other new features in Node 12, worker threads went stable. So that's great. Worker threads are stable. You can start using them in production. TLS 1.3. So TLS 1.3 support, and it's also now set to the default MAX protocol. We got an upgrade to NPM, so NPM's at 6.12, and the default HTTP parser has been switched to LLHTTP 2. And also, just 3 weeks ago today, Node 13 was released. And as per our long-term support policy, this release will be never promoted to LTS because it's an odd number. The purpose of odd-numbered release lines is for you to try out new features when you're developing and give those features time to bake before they end up in a stable release line and have to be supported for 30 months. There were actually just 73 major commits in this release, and when I looked back, I think that's the smallest number of major commits in any of the releases since Node 4. For comparison, there was 176 breaking changes in Node 12, and compared to just 73 in Node 13. And we actually tend to see that pattern. Odd number of releases tend to get less breaking changes than even number of releases. And one of the most notable features, I think, in Node 13 is we've switched to building with full ICU by default. And ICU stands for International Components for Unicode, and it provides the internationalization support within Node. And by building with full ICU by default, hundreds of locales are supported out of the box. Before, only English was supported out of the box, and you would need to install ICU separately. So if you look at this little snippet, we're just logging the current month with the Spanish locale. In Node 12 and less, by default, it'd print November, but now we'll actually print the correct string for that locale. And if we look at 2019 in numbers, we've gotten to 2,561 contributors. So that's up from 14 in 2009. We're now well over 2,500. I imagine that number will get bigger today after the Code and Learn, which will guide you through your first contribution to Node.js. There are also 109 active collaborators. And the collaborators really do a lot of the legwork of keeping the project moving. So the kind of things collaborators do, they review the PRs, they kick off CI runs on the PRs, and they land the PRs. And based on the fact that we've had almost 3,500 PRs this year, that's quite a lot of work. That's about 75 PRs a month. We've had about 1,500 issues, and that's raised, and that's just on the Node core repo. That's not including the other repos that we maintain, including Node.js help, where you can raise issues if you require help for Node.js. There's also been 45 different releases across the various release lines. So the current release lines typically get 2 releases a month. So Node 13 will get roughly 2 releases a month. The LTS releases, so Node 12, will get 1 release per month, roughly. And maintenance releases only get releases when something critical or a bug fix comes up. And keeping up with all of this activity is a massive task. We actually have several working groups under the Node.js team. And that includes Streams, who look after our Streams implementations, Build, who look after our infrastructure, Diagnostics, who look at how we can improve the diagnostics in Node Core and how to diagnose Node apps. And that's where some of the Node report work came from. It came from within that diagnostics working group. Internationalization, so the ICU stuff falls under this bracket. Docker, So Docker, they maintain our Docker Hub images for us. Add-on API, so that's all of the work around providing that ABI stable interface for Node. Benchmarking, so checking we're not regressing performance between all the different releases and release lines. And release, so I'm a member of the release working group. We build all of the releases for Node. We actually manually audit every single commit that goes into an LTS release, so it is actually a lot of work. And security, so they look after whenever there's vulnerabilities reported, making the call on whether we need to do a security release. And I want to do a very special shout out to the Node.js build working group. It's not a highly visible role in the project, and you normally only hear about them when something's gone wrong, like the website's gone down or your downloads are slow. And this is actually a Pi cluster that's in one of our collaborators, Rod's basement, that's running all of our ARM testing. And the kind of things the Node.js build group look after is they keep the machines running. They maintain our Jenkins server. We've actually got 2 Jenkins servers, one for the release and one for all of our CIs. And that's because when we're doing security releases, we want to do that somewhere separate with restricted access in case people could see the patch that we're putting into the new security release. There's over 200 machines to maintain, and we use Ansible playbooks to set all of these up. 50 different OS architectures. So there are a lot of machines. There's a lot to manage here. And the second one platform goes down, we can't run CI because we rely on green CI to land any PRs. So the second our machines fail, we can't land any PRs. All of our machines, or most of them, are running on donated hardware. So a big thank you to all of our donors for the infrastructure that helps us keep building Node.js. If you want to get involved, so there's the Node.js Code and Learn this afternoon, I believe. And that actually guides you through your first contribution to Node. My first contribution to Node, I think, was a README change. But once you're familiar with the process, you can build up from there. There's also node2do.org. So if you can't make it to the Code and Learn, it's an online version of that kind of process. And the way it works, it shows you the code coverage that we've got in Node, and then shows you functions that are not covered by our code coverage, and guides you on how you could write a test case to improve our code coverage. And you could come find us. There's lots of collaborators here over the duration of the conference, a few at the IBM booth. If you're interested in any of the working groups or getting involved, reach out, and we can probably point you to the correct people. And Node's 10. So that's kind of the highlights of the past 10 years. What's next really depends on what people are up for working on. So really the features that get pushed forward are the ones that have backing and people start building. So if you want a new feature, reach out and maybe start working on it, or we're trying to help with your idea and try and progress it. That's all for the talk. I'd just like to mention that at the IBM booth, we've got some quick labs to show you some interesting things that you can do with little Node apps. And yeah, thanks for listening for my talk, everyone.